Everybody, welcome today for this presentation. Dear Khenpo, Sodargye, and all people joining here today, it's my pleasure to briefly introduce Khenpo. Khenpo was ordained in 1985 at the Lund Buddhist Institute in Tibet and trained closely with the famous Khenpo Phuntsok Rinpoche, who is a leading Buddhist priest. He studied the traditional course of philosophical treatise and received the entire corpus of Tibetan esoteric Buddhist transmissions. He was eventually placed in charge of the Lund Buddhist Institute, where he became one of the principal teachers there. He also served as Yigim Phuntsok Rinpoche's main translator and teaching of Chinese disciples. Khenpo is a Tibetan Lama, a Buddhist scholar, and a teacher, a prolific translator into Chinese and modern Buddhist thinker. He's well known across Asia and the West for his interest in the integration of traditional Buddhist teaching with global issues and modern life. He's an estimated specialist in teaching Dharma, in which he has led educated programs for 33 years. Khenpo has become the most influential and acknowledged Tibetan Buddhist teacher in China. This has been done through Dharma translation, teaching, and a runnable charitable organization that provides help for needy people. Today, Khenpo will be talking about how Buddhism can inspire psychological research of subjective well-being. From my point of view, this is a particular interest since our research group has investigated the idea that the Eastern concept of harmony may play a more important role in people's well-being than satisfaction that is typically used in Western way of thinking. We're looking forward to hear how Buddhism may influence subjective well-being and to what extent Buddhism can have a beneficial influence on emotions and optimism. So today I'm honored to invite Khenpo to give a speech on how Buddhism would inspire psychological research on subjective well-being. Please allow you to be inspired and excited. Welcome, Khenpo.
I'm honestly really very happy today to be here with all of the professors and students present. It is truly an honor to have such an opportunity of some meaningful exchanges on Buddhist thought and subjective well-being. I'm not really a psychology major, so speaking in front of experts and scholars in the field, talking about psychology might not be appropriate, but I am actually really very interested in psychology. Before I became a monk, about 30 years ago, I attended what was then known as a teacher's college, a place dedicated to training future educators. At that school, there was a psychology course. I studied it at the time, but I didn't do very well because I didn't have a very good relationship with my teacher. I was always asking questions, but the teacher, to be honest, didn't really like me. However, later on, I became a monk, and when I ordained, he was actually quite happy. Afterwards, I also kept in touch with this teacher, but in any case, that textbook from back then, I've kept it for more than 30 years, even though I don't entirely agree with some of the content in the book. The life I have led since I became a monk may be somewhat different from the lives of many of you, but when it comes to seeking knowledge, studying, and exploring, there really isn't much difference in the pursuit of truth. Personally, I have always consistently maintained this identity as a student throughout my life. Even today, it's the same. I just asked our professor, have class today? If you do, I'd like to attend a class. This truly comes from my heart. In fact, as people live in this world, they are constantly learning, constantly learning, constantly enriching themselves. I believe that is what gives life meaning. I think many of you young people here are truly fortunate to be in such a beautiful city, a university town, and to have the opportunity to study psychological science. However, when it comes to Buddhist psychology, its content is extremely, extremely vast. With the short time we have today, it's simply impossible to cover it all. I believe that whether you are studying subjective psychology here, or the psychology of hedonism itself, or analytical psychology, the content is also, as you might expect, extremely extensive and vast. It can't be just one or two classes to understand its deep meaning, but today, with this precious opportunity here, can have a symbolic exchange. If you have any questions at any point during this session later, we can debate and interact together. Personally, I really believe psychology is extremely important because our world is actually made up of the spiritual world and the material world. Only the combination of these two can form the world that we personally possess. As we take a moment to look at our world today, most research and most pursuits place great emphasis on the truly material world. It seems that, especially when it comes to the fascinating and complex science of the mind, or the spiritual aspects of religion, not many people pay much attention. But in our daily lives, the things we encounter, some are related to the material world, but a considerable portion are related to our inner world. If we don't understand our inner world, perhaps we may not live very happily in this world. Maybe history has been like this as well. Just a couple of days ago, I had the opportunity to visit the beautiful and renowned Nobel Blue Hall, located right in the heart of Stockholm. When some people were introducing it to me, I also noticed that, for example, among the Nobel Prizes, if there were a psychology award, it would be a very good thing. It seems there are psychologists among the winners, but among the prize categories, there are ones for biology, chemistry, physics, literature, and even peace, etc. At that time, the person introducing it said, "Why isn't there a mathematics prize?" Because the woman whom Nobel loved left him for a mathematician. So he especially hated mathematics and didn't establish a mathematics prize. Whether that's true or not, I'm not sure. But that's what I was told at the time. That's how it was introduced to me. Regardless of whether mathematics is included or not, what I especially hope is if we could place more importance on the science of the mind, it might further enhance our sense of happiness. Although I personally don't understand much about psychology, I am very interested in it. So after I became a monk, I used various different and creative means and methods to buy a great many books on psychology from all over the world. In my study, there are a lot of books on psychology. As for you psychology experts, maybe my knowledge, I suppose it can't compare to yours. I definitely don't have your level of expertise. But when it comes to books, I can probably say that compared to some of your students, compared to some of you, I might be able to match you in the number of books I have, but this is actually of no use. In Tibetan Buddhism, we often have a saying, if knowledge only stays in books, it is useless. So when it really comes time to use it, actually, if the knowledge from books is in your heart, this is the best wise man. At this moment, I honestly don't really know what the current state or situation of your psychology research actually is. A couple of years ago, I saw a professor, a very authoritative professor in psychology, being interviewed by a news media outlet such as a television station due to time constraints. He was asked to answer a psychology question with just one word. At that time, he answered with one word, good. Then the interviewer said, one word might not be enough. Please use 2 words. So he said, not good. The interviewer said 2 words might not be enough to cover the content. Use 3 words. He said, not good enough. Then the interviewer said, you just said good, then not good, and now not good enough. Aren't these 3 contradictory? In the end, the scholar said, they're not contradictory. And when I said good earlier, I was referring to 10 years ago when psychological researchers saw ourselves as mind healers. So compared to 10 years ago, there has been progress, which is why I said good. Then he was asked, well, why not good? Because in the past 10 plus years, there haven't been any significant breakthroughs in scientific research in psychology as a whole. There is not much development, so it is not good. And why did he say not good enough? Because in our world, as we know it, in this reality, when combined with scientific concepts, there is still room for improvement. There are opportunities for growth and for continuous advancement. So that's how he answered. I think this particular kind of approach is really very interesting. Perhaps in a certain sense, some areas of current psychology can be described in this way. But now I realize that most of what we commonly refer to as psychology doesn't actually conduct research from the level of the mind. At most, perhaps it might be biology or neuroscience, studying things from that perspective. In fact, if we were to study things solely from the level of consciousness, for example, perhaps the field of psychology would become much deeper. In this regard, I personally admire the views of analytical psychologist Carl Jung, because Jung, actually lived quite a long time ago. I mean, it was really many years in the past, right? When he first started studying psychology, it was around 1918. At that time, in 1990, the Tibetan Book of the Dead was translated into English. From then on, with the help of this Book of the Dead, he continued to study psychology. But as you all know, Jung's research achievements in psychology later encountered all kinds of obstacles, because at that time throughout the world, Freud and his views had enormous influence. At first, the two of them were very good friends, but later, over time, their views diverged. After that, it brought a lot of negative impact on his research. Some people, in fact, even regarded him as someone who appeared to have religious tendencies. To put it nicely, he was called a mystic. Less favorably, he was unfortunately given various other labels. I have actually read some of his books before. Actually, the influence of Buddhism on him began with Hegel, because from Indian Buddhism and also from Mahayana Buddhism, some particular teachings, practices, or philosophical ideas from the Buddhist tradition had a noticeable impact on his thoughts. This perspective on the unconscious and psychological analysis was largely shaped by his influence. Why did I say earlier that he has a somewhat different approach from other psychologists? He mainly delved deeply from the level of consciousness. At that time, what was discussed was individual unconsciousness, which was in fact actually rather similar to Hegel's philosophical view. But later he proposed the concept of the collective unconscious. In fact, the collective unconscious, when we analyze this from the perspective of Buddhism, it is essentially that all sentient beings are drawn together by shared karma, or that everything is a self-manifestation of the Tathagatagarbha of the Dharma realm. There are many similarities with these ideas. The individual unconscious that was advocated at that time has similarities with some of the explanatory methods of the Alaya Vijnana that we discuss in Buddhism. You may have studied this as well. And just now, our professor also mentioned that during his research process, some areas of our Buddhism are actually the same as cognitive science. Through my own years of analysis and careful study, indeed, when we want to study consciousness, if we compare it with certain Buddhist doctrines, perhaps our research could achieve some breakthroughs or even lead to unprecedented discoveries. Because the current analyses in the field of psychology at present, whether it is behavioral psychology or cognitive psychology, many of these distinct psychological approaches, including their analytical methods in particular, actually indeed exist within Buddhism and have been analyzed over the past 2,500 years. I don't know if you have researched this aspect here. Actually, Buddhism has a unique perspective on consciousness. I've seen that many, including many psychology experts in the United States, when they talk about consciousness, they say that consciousness is something that throughout history people have not discovered, that it is something extremely simple and indescribable. They describe simply, but that's actually not the case. Our consciousness, just as some current psychological theories describe it now, actually has many aspects. For example, it is like a continuous flow, similar to a river. The current so-called uninterrupted continuum, that's why the river metaphor is used. And just like some psychological analogies today, The mind is also compared to a monkey, jumping here one moment and there the next. Our mind is the same. One moment we think someone looks attractive. The next moment we feel like sleeping, grasping at this, grasping at that. Its movements are extremely quick, just like the monkey analogy. Sometimes our consciousness is also compared to lightning, which flashes for an instant and then disappears immediately. When we generate all kinds of discriminating thoughts, including greed and anger, as soon as they arise, they vanish instantly, leaving no trace. Like lightning, moreover, this kind of consciousness, in terms of its phenomena and its true nature, is described in great detail, including its essence, its classifications, its functions, and all kinds of causes and conditions related to the mind. There are especially detailed descriptions of these in Buddhism. So in Jung's psychology, some of these aspects are also discussed. He explained that human consciousness continuously and repeatedly manifests, and its luminous aspect is always deeply buried in the depths of our hearts. He said that in the depths of our minds, everyone can discover luminosity, can manifest luminosity, such a truly seed of future hope. Everyone possesses such a seed for the future. This is quite similar to what we talk about in Buddhism. After generating bodhicitta, one ultimately reaches the highest state of enlightenment. When we try to understand this through some means, including quantum mechanics and through neurology to understand it, this is an indirect approach. It is not a direct way of understanding it. I see that many psychologists nowadays often do not conduct research from the level of consciousness itself, but rather from the perspective of the nervous system. Is the nervous system related to consciousness? Yes, there is a significant relationship. Moreover, all of these nervous systems have a direct relationship, specifically with our brain's nerves. So now among the neurons, there are billions of them, a vast number of incredibly complex and intricate neural networks. Each and every one of us has these networks in our brains, operating every moment. That's why when it comes to current brain research, whether in the United States, China, or even Europe, many people in the scientific community attach great importance to it. Governments of various countries are also investing heavily, putting a lot of money into research. Perhaps today's discussion of Buddhism and psychology is too specialized, but regardless, I still really want to continue sharing my thoughts. Because if we want to integrate Buddhist thought with psychology, it may only be possible to discuss it in depth. Otherwise, there's no way to really talk about it. So, as I mentioned earlier, our body's nervous system, is it related to our consciousness? There is an indirect relationship. For example, what the scientific community has now discovered in vaccines, there are actually approximately 11 million bytes of information in total. So much information is obtained, all sorts of information within the nervous system, but when people actually use it, it's really selective. Maybe only about 40% of it can be utilized. Now, this principle is actually explained very clearly in Buddhism. In Buddhism, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body are called the 5 sense consciousnesses. What these sense consciousnesses receive is actually without discrimination. They simply collect all the information from the external world. They do not have the power of choice. Only our consciousness has the power to choose. However, consciousness can be divided into a non-discriminating state and a discriminating state. Non-discriminating consciousness can't choose. Only the discriminating consciousness can make choices. It can select from all the information what is useful to itself. Therefore, in Buddhist logic, it is said, for example, when a person is in a garden listening to music, while eating sweet candy in his mouth, seeing the beautiful garden with his eyes, feeling the gentle, cool breeze as it brushes softly against his skin, and smelling the fragrant scent of flowers with his nose, in this process, he can receive information from all 5 external senses. But when it comes to actually making a judgment, the power of choice is only one. For example, at that moment, I might think, this looks beautiful. Oh, this is really beautiful. At that time, it's impossible for you at the same moment to simultaneously think, wow, this sounds great. You can't have both. Maybe we haven't noticed this before, but if we observe closely, we'll find it matches what modern psychologists say. Just now, the information brought by the 5 sense faculties, eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and body, can include a lot of information, but it simply cannot be analyzed. If it can't be analyzed, then it also can't judge whether something is pleasant or painful. For example, what my eyes see as beautiful, it is later filtered through the mind. And after the mind filters it, only then does it determine whether it is beautiful and whether it brings happiness or suffering. Therefore, whether it is our happiness or our values, our own mind is extremely crucial, because when it comes to happiness, joy, or attachment to good and bad, these are linked to outside factors. What's even more important is the subjective role played by our own mind. If we only rely on physiology or neuroscience alone, simply using careful and precise experimental methods, then our own inner personal subjective sense of happiness may not be analyzed very thoroughly. Everyone here knows that there are many different sources of happiness nowadays that people experience, according to Western psychology, are either hedonistic sources of happiness, meaning they are things or experiences that bring immediate pleasure or satisfaction to individuals, which is what I just mentioned, the sensory pleasures brought by all of the five senses in particular. Senses can't distinguish when the senses work together with consciousness. After they combine, one experiences, oh, I saw something beautiful today. I ate delicious candy. But this kind of experience, the very first time, brings especially tremendous pleasure. For people who truly love candy, the very first bite is particularly sweet. By the sixth bite, it's just ordinary. It might even taste bad or unpleasant or make you feel completely fed up. This is true for many pleasures people are addicted to nowadays, which are actually connected to sensory happiness. For instance, when you go to a very beautiful place, the first time you see it, you think, wow, this is beautiful, I'm so happy. But after a while, you don't feel anything anymore. This is also true for romantic relationships. At the beginning, many people feel it's very sweet. But when you finally have it, it's not actually all that joyful. Anything related to our body, be it the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or body, after experiencing these physical pleasures related to the body, the cells quickly, or in some cases when the contact changes, the feeling gradually disappears or completely fades away. Another source of happiness, as we often find in our daily lives, is something that can bring us joy and contentment, is what the philosopher Aristotle himself strongly advocated. The true and deeper meaning of life, a kind of happiness based on meaning. This might mainly be, for example, a writer or someone conducting research in a certain field, when their research is finally recognized by society and demonstrates their value, a natural sense of happiness arises within them. But this kind of happiness tends to last much longer. This is what I meant earlier. In Buddhism, a kind of happiness comes from the level of consciousness. Happiness at the level of consciousness actually is, when you truly understand this principle, the happiness you truly gain, the value you genuinely embody, brings you happiness that lasts for a longer period of time. Many people in our society today seek happiness in a very direct and simple way, like grabbing and eating fast food quickly. They want to obtain their happiness quickly, right away. They hope that this kind of happiness will never fade away. But in the process of seeking happiness, I think that many people's choices are honestly not very good. Nowadays, many people pursue happiness, especially by often obtaining it through fragmented culture. I heard that in America, 2/3 of people rely on short, often brief news pieces from the media to enrich themselves, expressing life values to gain happiness. There are also some people who are now, in particular, addicted to games, completely immersed in virtual worlds and fully engaged. They spend the entire day, from morning until night, completely absorbed in games that are unrealistic or use unreal information to fill their lives. When many people encounter problems in real life, they're dissatisfied but unwilling to face them. They always have an escapist mentality. This is now considered a pathological condition, sometimes referred to as lazy cancer patients. It's a very frightening state. Clearly, these are things you should face, but you don't dare to, always running away. Recently, I met some professors. They're also quite worried about young people nowadays. They say that young people today don't study properly. Every day, aside from enjoying life, no ambition, no family responsibility, nor towards society, spending every day in a muddled state. In their view, it seems that many people nowadays spend every day in a state of confusion, in a state of living aimlessly, indulging in pleasure without purpose. They have no higher or noble ideals. They're very worried about the future of humanity. Am I expressing this well? I don't agree with that at all. But what I just want to say is everyone here should often reflect on the meaning of our lives, and from this gain the true happiness that we possess in this human world. Happiness is a goal that everyone pursues. In Tibetan Buddhism, we have a famous traveler who once said that all human beings pursue their own happiness from morning till night. Even tiny ants and earthworms also pursue their own happiness from morning till night. I don't know why ants are always so busy every day, but they must be pursuing happiness too in their own way. I wonder if anyone here studies ants. I don't know what earthworms are often like underground, but they seem to be in a very peaceful state. Still, they too pursue their own happiness. However, among us humans, happiness is established through the mind. If it's not established through one's own mind, but merely relying on simply certain external things or factors, I think there are certain difficulties. Why do I say this? For example, if someone really likes another person, but this person is, say, an African or perhaps an Asian, or for example, an American, if he really possessed the quality of bringing happiness, perhaps everyone who saw them would be happy and joyful indeed. But that's not always true. Different people may have different impressions of him, and the happiness they feel is different. Therefore, why did I just say that happiness is mainly related to one's own mind? For instance, some people feel they get real happiness from romantic life. Some people from their career success gain real happiness and joy. Some people, for example, might perhaps have a child at home, or some enjoyable family activity or tradition brings them happiness. Therefore, each person's happiness is subjectively related to their values and has a very direct relationship with their mindset. Therefore, when some behavior in our lives or some event brings us unhappiness, we must learn to truly examine our inner mind. Buddhism may have some unique approaches to subjective happiness. I'll offer a few suggestions. First, Buddhism often contemplates views on life and death. To enhance happiness through death contemplation, some might ask, how can contemplating death bring happiness? It's even more frightening and a bit scary. It's best not to bring it up. Actually, there's a school that offers a life and death course. Later, more and more students enrolled. Eventually, over time, through discussion, they learned the truth of life. And many people gradually learn to truly cherish and deeply appreciate the happiness and joy that they have in their lives now, because none of us can escape death. So through this kind of course, they enhance their happiness even more. In our Tibetan region, basically over 90% of people often contemplate what happens after death and when they will die and pay great attention to death. But this attention to death doesn't bring negative emotions to their lives. Instead, everyone is genuinely very positive about life and truly treasures time. They also deeply and truly cherish and value everything that they have in their lives, appreciating everything they possess. Second, I suggest enhancing happiness through contentment and having few desires. Some Buddhists think that studying Buddhism means you must be poor. For example, monastics must live very frugally in their daily lives. There's this kind of thinking as well. Actually, it's not like that. In an aspiration prayer, we monastics often recite, may I neither be born wealthy or poor, but born to middle-class family and always be a monk. This means, may I not be reborn in an especially wealthy family, nor be reborn in an especially poor family. Let me be reborn in a relatively middle-class family to practice the Dharma. The meaning is that being too wealthy may bring pressure and also an unhappy life. Being too poor also means lacking adequate food and clothing. So if we are born into a middle-class family, we can be very content. I think that this particular attitude of being truly content is in fact also, very important because now we have health and our food needs are met. You see, right now there are about 840 million people in the world who are living in severe poverty and constant hunger, struggling every single day. We don't have to worry about food, so we should feel a sense of satisfaction. It seems that you Swedes, often say, lagom, which means just right, correct? This approach is actually very good. Practitioners feel contentment. I heard that you don't keep much money in the bank, not much money on your cards. This lifestyle, actually, some of the Buddhist doctrines of the mean are also very good. Of course, maybe this is a rather unique case, as you can see, in this situation. Being a Nordic country with good economic conditions in all aspects, maybe that's related, but it's also quite similar to many other places. When we were actually in Stockholm on payday, all the restaurants do really very well. Many restaurants are particularly happy. So the situation is similar in many places. Happiness levels are especially heightened that day. Where I am is a Buddhist university. Our Buddhist university also, these young monks also receive monthly allowances for chanting, but it's usually distributed at the end of the month. After the distribution, many young monks also go to restaurants to eat. At that time, the young monks' happiness also increases. Regardless what it is, sometimes our happiness has a direct or indirect relationship with money, but it's not absolute. I've met many very, very wealthy people, but they are very, very miserable. Third suggestion for consideration. We enhance happiness through observing our mind's nature. There is a saying in Buddhism, in the three realms, mind is primary. Those observe the mind achieve ultimate liberation. Those cannot will ultimately sink. Buddhism has a method. If we truly recognize the nature of our own mind, then there is a kind of joy that transcends present happiness and suffering, a constant, unchanging happiness. As for this kind of happiness, by truly and deeply recognizing the very essence of the mind, the profoundly and deeply innate awakening within our minds, as if by nature, fully blossoms. With this realization, even if you become the world's most incredibly famous, wealthy or powerful person, you would still look at this world with equanimity. Even if your life has reached its lowest point, even if you have fallen to the level of a beggar, or if you are imprisoned for life, for the rest of your natural life, even then you won't necessarily suffer. You have your own state of joy, truly. This happiness, achieved through meditation, is truly attainable through practice. In Eastern culture, there are truly countless accomplished and fully realized beings, individuals who have reached great understanding. I believe that whether we look at it from Buddhism's perspective on subjective well-being or from the standpoint of psychological research, when this academic study ultimately reaches its highest point, everyone will truly recognize the nature of their own mind. The methods for recognizing the mind's nature should also be really very direct. And indeed, there are now many such methods available. Finally, I also hope that many of us, through our own methods and approaches, recognize the truly luminous, gentle luminosity hidden deep within each of us. In Buddhism, recognizing it is called the wisdom of great bliss. But how many people in our world actually recognize the nature of the mind and thereby attain happiness and joy? It's hard to say. Looking at the global happiness index around the world, I saw that Switzerland is ranked 10th in the world this year, according to the latest report. I noticed that many Asian countries and other countries around the world have different rankings. Many Nordic countries are ranked quite high. I'm going to Israel in a while. Israel's happiness index is also quite high. I want to try. Switzerland happiness index is also up front. I'd like to experience that too. They say Norway once again ranks the highest this year. If that's the case, I'm planning to go there tomorrow. I'd like to experience it personally to see whether people there are truly happy. Thank you.